This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to this week's edition of Doc and Jock. I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Joining me today, probably in a somber mood, maybe even in an angry mood, my guy Adam, the Jock Strozinski. We timed it out to be able to record this podcast after the Red Wings finale, and boy, was it heartbreaking. Fans got 35 seconds literally to celebrate a historic goal, 3.6 seconds left or so, a miracle, but only to be disappointed because the Flyers pulled their goalie to try and win a game in regulation, so fans couldn't even enjoy one of the most miraculous goals in the history of the Red Wings. And as we talk, the Red Wings have been officially eliminated from the postseason for the 8th straight year. 95% of our podcast, the run of the Detroit Sports Podcast in its entirety, has been without the Red Wings in the postseason. It's crazy to think about, especially after the 2.5 decades where they were consistently in the postseason, but it was epic disaster for the Red Wings. There's no other way for me to look at it other than, clearly, if you heard us 2 weeks ago, I was like, look, just please bottom out, lose. There's a high potential this team is going to disappoint you, and that's what happens, is that it's very much a situation in which this team was not good enough to earn a spot in the postseason. They collapsed down the stretch. You needed basically to beg another team to do something for you, and it didn't happen. And the Capitals, yeah, you can make excuses, and we'll break all those down, what fans are looking at. But bottom line, to me, this Red Wings season is going to be highlighted by the collapse, but there are still things that were positive that will come from it. We're not saying that the future is dim for this Red Wings team. What we're talking about and what is the most bothersome is this team did not meet its potential, and partly it's the finger that I'm going to point is to Steve Yzerman when he did not, and we've said it before, when he did not add to this team, this season was going to crash and burn. Because I know you're a big hockey guy. I know when you found out that the Wings were eliminated, I know you were potentially very much in line with somebody that would be very upset and frustrated with what happened. Tell everybody, what was your reaction? How did you take in that ending, that wild-ass ending? And literally, fans are so upset. Detroit sports is so much defunct that the fans got a minute to process a miraculous goal before the realization hit that their season's done. Done. Finito. No more Red Wings in 2023, 2024.
I just laughed. I had one of those maniacal cackles because it was funny to me. This team did not deserve to go to the playoffs. This team did not deserve any type of retribution. This team did not deserve anything good. This team got exactly what it deserved. This team shot itself in the foot not once, but twice during large stretches of this season. You go back and you rewind time. You can go back to a couple different moments in the season. There was a point where they were losing 6 and 7 games in a row, and 2 of those games were against a Phoenix Coyotes team where they lost 4-0 and 4-1. You could only muster 1 goal in that stretch. You lost to a team that plays in a high school arena. You lost to a team that maybe on a good night, on a sellout, they've got 15,000 fans if you're lucky. And 14,000 of those are your fans that travel there or live there because it's Phoenix. Nobody likes hockey in Phoenix. Yet you couldn't manage to win one of those games. And then you fast forward a little bit, a couple weeks ago, you had that national game where you're taking on the Washington Capitals and you can't buy a goal. You get a goal with 0.9 seconds left. At that point, you've already been shut out. The game is already over. That right there turned your season. That was the tide. You needed to win that game, and you couldn't come up with a goal to save your season. After that, you were playing catch-up the rest of the year. And I don't want to hear from people that, well, you've got stuff to build on, or the end of the season was exciting, and there are pieces here that you can look at, and you can take things from this, and maybe they'll be like the Detroit Lions, and they'll be able to springboard off of what they've done at the end of the season. Look at what they did at the end of the season. You guys realize Montreal is one of the worst teams in the league? You gave Montreal a 4-goal lead the other night just to come back and win it in overtime. Montreal was beating your ass up until, 23 seconds left in the third? Maybe a little bit less than that. I think maybe it might have been 5 seconds left in the third. I don't even remember. When David Perron slaps a Hail Mary at the net and it finds the back of it, only for you to go to overtime. You can't win in overtime. You got to win it in a shootout. And at that point, your season is over. There is nothing here that I look at as being favorable. There is nothing here that I look at as being a check plus. This season has been an unmitigated disaster from basically the word go. This team had a point where I think they were a 7-point favorite. And I want to say this was probably back in maybe early January, if I remember correctly. And you had the third playoff spot tied up, and then you shit the bed. And you lost 6 games straight. And you came back and you won a couple games straight. And then you had another one of those losing spells. And I think the most concerning thing, if you really go back, I don't even look at what took place the last week or so, last week and a half. I don't even look at any of that. I go back to that losing stretch. And you look at that losing stretch, and a lot of people want to say, well, Dylan Larkin wasn't there. He was injured. He was battling. He was hurt. I don't care. That team showed no fight. That team showed no gumption. That team showed no want to. At certain points, this is a roster that, for the most part, is pretty veteran-laden, right? There's a lot of veterans on this team. Those guys in that locker room couldn't figure it out. Those guys in that locker room couldn't get up for those games. Those guys in that locker room couldn't find the will to get you one win. All you needed was one win. One win was the difference. Let that sink in. One win. When they tell you every win counts and every win matters, this right here shows it. Every win counts. Every win matters. And this team shot itself in the foot repeatedly. And I don't know if it's on the coach, because whenever I hear Derek Lalone talk, I just want to go to sleep. So if the guys in the locker room feel that way, I get it. I don't know if it's all on Steve Yzerman because he did nothing at the trade deadline. And let's be honest, he's the one who put this roster together. I don't know if it's on the players because, like I said before, your veterans couldn't help motivate you or get you up. I don't know if it's on the goaltending because at times it looks like you got a piece of Swiss cheese or a shooter-tooter in net. There are so many problems with this team, and I think this game and the end of this season really highlights a lot of what went wrong for this team. And to me, the season was an unmitigated disaster. I take 0 success from this season. Do you find any redeeming qualities to what we had this season as a Red Wing fan?
Because all I can say is it's just really frustrating for a hockey team that could have been in the postseason. It's so frustrating for a team that really, in my mind, had enough talent offensively to get stuff done. You see the emergence of Lucas Raymond. You see Dylan Larkin having his career best scoring. But bottom line, the coaching wasn't good enough. Defensively, not up to par. Goaltending, you just Lyon, Raymer, he came up when he was needed. But you need upgrades. And I just don't understand why the Detroit Lions had to really go down this slow path of trying to just when you look at the collapse, yeah, injuries played a factor, but you didn't have a deep enough team. And what I think stinks is, and I guess we got to talk about it, how are we rating the job that Steve Yzerman did? Because he's taking his time, and it doesn't feel like we're getting elite general managership. You're getting an upgrade of talent. We understand that Ken Holland maybe had this team not in the best spot, but it feels to me that Steve Yzerman could be doing better at his job in regards to 5 years, no postseason. You would think maybe 4 years, okay, but year 5, you don't get to the postseason, and we're talking about major holes at goaltending and on defense. It just seems like, for whatever reason, he's been given far too much leeway and far too much patience in a sports world that it's win now. And you still got the support of fans that are like, oh, it's all good. It's crazy.
I think you'll learn a lot about how Steve Yzerman feels about this season if he makes any moves this offseason. I think if he does a replacement of the head coach, if he starts moving guys out, I think it'll tell you everything you need to know, and I think it buys him maybe another year or two. But I think you're right. At a certain point, you have to start questioning the guy who's putting this all together. You have to start questioning the guy whose vision this is. And it's Steve Yzerman's vision. This is his team, right? And I don't think just because you won a couple Stanley Cups when you were a player, just because you are the captain, just because you are a guy who is beloved in this town, that you just get to kind of skate by. I think at certain points you have to answer questions. And I'm incredibly curious to know what Steve Yzerman thinks about the job that the players did, what Steve Yzerman thinks about the job that Derek Lalonde and the coaching staff did. I'm interested to find out what Steve Yzerman thinks about the veterans on this team, because this team shouldn't hinge on a guy like Dylan Larkin. We've beat a dead horse on Dylan Larkin. Dylan Larkin is a good player. Dylan Larkin is nowhere near a superstar, nowhere near a star player. He is a good player on a Stanley Cup winning roster. He is probably a second line winger, a third line center on a Stanley Cup winning team. He is a good player. There is no reason that your team should go in the dumps if he gets hurt. There is no reason that you can't figure out how to score if he's out of the lineup. To be honest with you, he's not. It's not like he's a top 25 player. He's not. You can go up and down a list of guys in this league, and there are guys who are 10 years better, light years better than him. And it's one of those things where I don't even know where to begin, because we're now 5 years into this Yzer plan, and the goaltending hasn't been figured out. You don't really have any star players to put around Dylan Larkin. If you're counting on Dylan Larkin as being your star player, that's your first mistake. You look at the defense. Defense is still a problem. These are all issues that we had when Steve Yzerman walked in. Head coach has a ton of question marks. Again, all problems that Steve Yzerman inherited. So where are we at? If you want to tell me that your minor league system is better, great. You know what that translates to in the National Hockey League? Doesn't help you get any wins. You know, at least not right now. If we've got to wait 10 years, yeah, maybe then. But right now, it's not good. And more to your point with what you were saying earlier, you kind of needed to make a move at the trade deadline. You needed to go out and you needed to trade some assets, and you need to get a guy that you could bring in and lock up to a long-term deal and add him to this collection of players that you got. DeBrincat's not your star. DeBrincat, again, a good player, probably a better player than Larkin, but he's not a superstar. He's not a star player. He's a guy. He goes on these cold stretches where he can't find the back of the net, and he couldn't hit it if it was a beach ball and it was the ocean. He has trouble. So you've got to look at this roster. You're going to have to retool. I think you have to have a long discussion with Derek Lalonde and see if you guys are even on the same page, and see if maybe he is part of the problem. And with that being said, this will be another coach that Yzerman gets to hire. And in my estimation, it has to be the right guy. If you don't get it right this time, I don't think you get to make another hire. I think you're done. So it is frustrating at the highest of levels, similar to what's going on with the Pistons, right? Like, as frustrating as the Red Wings are, and as frustrating as the job that Steve Yzerman is doing, you have a guy in Troy Weaver who still has a job. On our rundown, I've got Monty Williams. It should be Troy Weaver. You have a guy on the Pistons who's running that organization who still has a job after his team finished for the worst record in the NBA, finished with the worst record in franchise history, has guys that he's drafted that are no longer playing in the league, has a team that is comprised of a bunch of guys that don't necessarily fit. And if you're lucky enough to get the ping pong ball to bounce your way again, if you go through and you look at guys who are projected to be in that top 10 range, none of those guys really fit on your roster. You've got a roster that's full of bit players and parts. You don't. I don't know what Cade Cunningham is. I don't know if he's going to be a star or not. But yet, Troy Weaver still has a job on this team. Can you explain to me how the hell Troy Weaver still collects a paycheck from the Detroit Pistons and how that is even acceptable if you're Tom Gores?
Man, cuz the biggest letdown in the history of sports probably is the Red Wings and Pistons within a week of each other just ending their 23 season. It's so unbelievable.
Dude, when the Pistons season ended, I was glued to my phone and glued to the radio, just listening for news that Troy Weaver got the axe. It was expected. You were counting on it. I was waiting with bated breath. It never came. And then there was an announcement that was made that they're hiring a new person for the position of basketball operations. What the hell does Troy Weaver do? Makes no sense. The way this organization is run is comical.
All we can hope is that the person just comes in right away and drops the hammer on Troy Weaver. That's all you can hope for, is that he doesn't want to, the thinking is that Tom Gores doesn't want to fire him. So whatever the reason why, it's embarrassing at the highest level to think that someone could have a worse record every year over 5 years, and to have an embarrassment of when you look at the roster, the lack of talent. It's really deflating. It's frustrating because with the Red Wings, at least you have hope. Lucas Raymond is going to be a star. You have some pieces that you could build around on defense, that if you add 5 players, okay, it's a playoff team, and you get that final piece with the goalie. With the Pistons, because unfortunately it's hopeless. If you don't get the person that's scouting the talent, you only have 2 basketball players on the whole team in 5 years. Teams have passed you by. It's unfortunately a fan base that's now deflated. It's embarrassed by what they've seen. It's basically starting from scratch, and you're adding another person to the mix. So the idea is leadership at the highest level, and that goes to Tom Gores, is not where it needs to be. And most people probably would have expected that after the season, Gores would have just eliminated Arm Tellem, Troy Weaver, all the scouts, people that were involved in the creation of the roster the last 5 years, and start over. Then you hire the president of basketball operations. So what's crazy is, okay, what if what's embarrassing is that the strategy for the new president should be, okay, I'm going to sit back for a year, collect my $4 or $5 million check, then I'll fire Troy Weaver after the 24-25 season. So you're just delaying inevitably. You're just going to fall behind further as an organization. And because here's what's terrible. When you just have had unlucky breaks completely along the way. You don't get Wembanyama. You don't get the benefit of having a supremely superstar player when you get the number 1 pick. You get Cade Cunningham, who's a good player, but nobody thinks he's on the upper echelon of elite. He can't single-handedly carry a team. And then you follow it the next year with Ivy, and you clearly have 2 guys that can't play together. So you didn't allocate your assets properly. And it stinks because it's just depressing. It's very much a situation in which the lack of trust involved, it's just comical. It's an embarrassing, comical thing to talk about, this Detroit Pistons team, in regards to how they've operated, the leadership, and coming off the heels, because the Lions and the Pistons won the same amount of games. And the Pistons play 82. And the Lions did it in an NFL season. So that's just how embarrassing the entire thing is. It's embarrassing. There's no hope. With the Red Wings, at least you can say, okay, there's some young talent in Grand Rapids. Everyone's established, really believes that there's hope if you pluck the right pieces and you add the right pieces around it. The question mark with the Red Wings is going to be, is Lalonde going to be the transitional coach before you land the number 1 and gets you over the hump? But the Pistons, because they're starting less than the bottom. Whatever it is that you would describe, it's completely something that, by and large, is now really the unfortunate I word. They're irrelevant.
This is the problem with this organization. It starts at the very, very top. It's because of Tom Gores. If Tom Gores was a real owner, he would have came in and he would have chopped heads off and guys would have been fired. Everybody would have been ushered out with a box in their hand and he'd have said, see ya, get gone. Don't let the door hit you where the good Lord split you. And then he would have reached out to the league and would have gotten in contact with somebody to help him hire somebody to be in charge of the actual basketball operations of this team, and he would have stepped away. He would have got out of the way. Instead, he is buying whatever Troy Weaver is selling him. At a certain point, and this is the thing I don't think Pistons fans realize either, this is one of a few franchises that have won multiple championships. This is one of a few historic franchises that have done very well for this league. This is one of a few franchises that when they're doing well, they are helping the league and do better. I don't think a lot of Pistons fans realize that. At a certain point, I think Adam Silver has to step in and has to have this come to Jesus meeting with Tom Gores and be like, look, you bought it for a couple mil. You got to sell it. You got to go. Because you are running this thing into the ground. You have created a crater the size of the moon with this franchise. You are not equipped to be an owner in this league. You are horrible at what you are doing. And things have to change. You can turn around and sell this team for a couple $1 billion. He'll make money hand over fist. At a certain point, something's got to change. I feel like the league has to step in because with what just took place earlier this week, it shows you that you have an owner who is asleep at the wheel. You have an owner who just doesn't care. You have an owner who just doesn't get it. And I don't know what else is going to help you get it. You won 14 games this season. You won as many games as a football team. That football team played approximately a quarter of the games that you played all season, give or take a couple here or there. At some point, you have to recognize that your team is in complete disarray. Your roster is a mess from head to toe. You're going to get a high draft pick this year, and you're not going to be able to utilize it appropriately because the way your roster is currently constructed. And then if you look at what's going on later on down the line in a couple of years, you don't have a ton of draft capital, so you got to hit on this upcoming year's pick. You've got to make good on it because you don't have the ability to say, hey, we'll do something next year with the pick that we have then. No. You don't have that luxury. And you have a head coach who I'm not even sure wants to be here. I kind of feel like he's still on the beach. He got fired from the Phoenix Suns, and I think he still might still be in Phoenix. Like, I don't think he actually ever came to Detroit. I think it's like a robot or a blow-up doll that they've got on the sideline there, and he's the one who's running the plays and drawing them up and calling them in. It is a mess from head to toe. I don't know if I've ever seen an organization this poorly run. I think let's put this into perspective. I think this Detroit Pistons team, underneath Troy Weaver, I think it is ran worse than the Matt Millen Detroit Lions. And I know the Matt Millen Detroit Lions didn't win a game. I got it. I understand. But you could look to different pieces. There were some guys on that team that you were like, all right, it made sense. Some things made sense. I feel like with this organization, it needs to be gutted from head to toe. At least the Matt Millen era Lions, they had Martin Mayhew. Say what you want to say about Martin Mayhew. You go back, you look at what Martin Mayhew did when he was here. He was a decent general manager. He wasn't great, but he was decent. I don't think there's any redeeming quality with this Detroit Pistons team. I think ownership is asleep at the wheel. I think at a certain point, this team needs to get blown up, and I think you have to have the league step in and force a sale because Tom Gores just does not get it and does not seem to care to get it. And it is frustrating at the highest level.
Are they the worst? Are they the worst run franchise? Were they worse than the teams that lost 115 plus for the Tigers? Because this kind of has the feel of back in 2003 when things were disastrous with the Detroit Tigers. Does it feel like that? It feels like maybe we're in for another decade of this?
To me, it feels like this team is completely hopeless. With those teams, I never really felt hopeless. I was frustrated and I was mad and I was upset, right? But I never felt like it was hopeless. I feel like with Troy Weaver at the helm, I feel like there's nothing good that can come for this team. To me, I've got zero faith in the Pistons doing anything well. And to be honest with you, I'm kind of checked out. Like, how many times can you watch them lose a basketball game? How many times can you watch them bounce a ball off their knee or off their shoe? You know, how many times can you watch them pass it to the wrong colored jersey? At this point, I'm waiting for them to shoot it at the wrong basket. That's where I'm at. So I feel hopeless. Hopeless is the word I would use. I do not see this team being relevant for an incredibly long time. And with those other teams, I don't know. With the Lions, it's weird because I always felt like the following year, you're like, okay, this is the year something good could click. Something good could happen. When I look at the Pistons, I don't see anything good happening for a while. With that Tigers team, I was like, okay, well, you know, minor league system, guys will be coming up. It's going to get better. It's going to get better here real soon. I don't feel that way with the Pistons. With the Pistons, I have no hope that anything will get better.
Yeah, no hope. That's it. There's no bright future. It's abysmal. From moving away from the Palace of Auburn Hills, an arena that people loved and had a lot of great memories to because it's so bad. Okay, I was hanging out with the girls 24 hours ago. All right, and it was a good opportunity to hang with them, give the mom a break a little bit, and you know they're in a girl shop, so you get an opportunity to kind of scroll on your phone a little bit. And what pops on my Twitter? Freaking Charlie V is blasting away on podcasts going, oh my God, my time with the Pistons was horrible. I had anxiety. I was drinking, partying. And he's like sharing memories of when the team decided, well, John Kuester, the head coach, yeah, fuck him. We don't like him. We're not going to show up. Half the team was like,
what a throwback
we ain't showing up.
Name.
It was so embarrassing to see that it just, the Pistons lately have been synonymous with toxicity, have been synonymous outside of that run with Joe Dumars, have been associated with, really, there's been no middle ground. They had this epic run of making it to the Eastern Conference Final, and then ever since, they've just have struggled to get it back together. And unfortunately, Joe Dumars lost the magic touch, and after that, it was horrible. They had the nice run in the late 80s with Isaiah Thomas. They had their dream run. They got it to the Going to Work Pistons, that dream season in 2004. Then you had the run of getting to the Eastern Conference Final. You could argue that they could have won at least one or two more with the talent that they had. But since then, since that era has come to a close, you're talking about 15 years of being irrelevant. And the entire length of this podcast has just been hammering the Pistons team. And we like basketball. We love college basketball. We love professional basketball, but not at the level of what we have seen. And the fan base deserves a lot more. And really, you know, in transitioning to the Lions, you saw once they recognize, oh, we need people that understand the culture and understand what talent evaluation looks like. Brad Holmes found steals. At least over 50% of his draft picks have been successful, even in later rounds, highlighted by Amon-Ra St. Brown. Troy Weaver has used a defunct strategy of targeting big men, and that strategy has left 15 years ago. Like, come on. Like, literally at the basic level, not being advanced in any way analytically. The Pistons do not have a plethora of individuals that can shoot the basketball and have it go in at a high rate. After 5 years of building, you have no shooters. You have no guys that can shoot three-pointers. And that's after a coach in Dwayne Casey that was known for that. It just seemed like his strategy was, you know, instead of taking 20 a game, we need to take 30. Well, your guys are making 4. Well, okay. And then when they started going up to 30, they started making 5. It's like, come on, give us a break. Give us something that give us a product that we can be proud of. Guys that can shoot, play well together, not look like they've never played basketball together. So, luckily, the Lions and Tigers have started at least to turn the corner. At least you could see the Tigers strategy producing some wins, and the Lions got to within an inch of playing in the Super Bowl. But with the Pistons, it's irrelevant. So, in looking at the Lions, it really does highlight how important leadership is, how important a general manager is. And in some way, hopefully the president of basketball operations for the Pistons sits Monty Williams down and says, look, are you interested in this shit or not? Dude, You're one of the highest paid coaches in the NBA, and your performance and your rotations and your stubbornness was completely embarrassing at the highest levels. Dude, you're supposed to be an advanced mind in the game, and it just looked like you were stealing checks. So, and now we're going to talk about Brad Holmes, and now we're talking about an elite general manager that always kind of feels like he's one step ahead and feels like he's now well respected amongst the league. Whereas the Pistons, it's complete opposite. Let's not talk about the Pistons anymore because it's so frustrating how there's nothing there. And you got a player or two, and that's about it. But a week out from the draft, things are so positive with the Lions. Everybody's sitting fat and happy. Everybody's comfortable. Everybody's just super comfortable. They're excited for tonight's reveal of the uniform. They're excited for the freshness of the organization. And to me, like I said, when you hear all the draft analysts and our talks and mock drafts, you could get a dozen different guys. And many people will be comfortable getting that player because they don't have to start. You recognize that from this draft, my overall overriding thought would be improve the defense. The most pressing need in my mind is get some depth pieces in the secondary defensive line, maybe another young developing safety. But this draft, many people will have confidence in Brad Holmes, but this is because, and looking at it, this is an important draft because a lot of the young rookies in a year or two are going to start demanding fat money. So this draft will be the beginning of the restocking of the roster when you got to make key decisions on Penei Sewell and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jack Campbell and Jamison Williams and Aiden Hutchinson. Not everybody can stay. Aleem McNeil. So this draft and in 23 will have the foundation of what's next, given that the Super Bowl window is here, and you got to keep this train going. So for sustainability, these 7 draft picks are important. But I think I'm as comfortable as can be. Like I feel like most people are going to grade it an A or B across the board, and there's an opportunity when you look at it for if there's a player that they absolutely love, they can trade up for it. They can do really whatever. And in Brad Holmes, we trust has been the mantra. Nobody's listening to any criticism of the Lions at this point. It's all been pretty positive. So I'm just going to take in the draft and maybe just get a little glimpse of what it's like downtown for a half hour before Allen Park. But I feel like this is the most comfortable and relaxed you can be heading into a draft for the Lions because the roster as constructed is pretty good before the draft.
Yeah, look, I agree with you 100%. I think what you said was incredibly important. This is a very pivotal draft for this team. And it's not just because they have the ability to add more talent to this roster, but this is the draft where they're going to start to add pieces that are going to be slotting in for guys that will be departing because you're looking to save money or you're looking to spend money on other guys. This is an incredibly pivotal draft. And look, I think you're right. If you look at pressing needs, I think we both agree defense needs to be targeted. You need cornerback, you need D-end, you need help kind of all over the place. So I think with this draft, Brad Holmes has to get it right. I think he will get it right because he has taken the approach of going into it and taking the best talent available, and that has shown that it pays dividends for him, and especially when you're drafting at 29. It's really hard to predict who's going to be available there. So you're looking for the most talented guy, but I think you raised another really interesting point when you said these guys can move up, they can move back. There's a lot that this team can do at 29, and I feel like we need to talk about that a little bit more here in a few moments. But this draft, there is a lot of flexibility for this team, but this is an incredibly important draft for Brad Holmes, for the Detroit Lions, and I do think that they have to somehow figure out a way to add some more talent and add some more depth to this defense. This has to be impactful talent, guys who are getting a lot of reps. You could be a rotational player, but I need you taking up reps on that field. I need you putting pressure on quarterbacks. I need you to make life hell for opposing quarterbacks. And that's kind of where my focus would be going into this draft. It's somehow figuring out a way where we can generate more of a pass rush and get home to the quarterback. It can't just be Aiden Hutchinson out there applying all these pressures all the time, but not really able to get home because the quarterback can escape out at the other side. So with all that being said, Lions have 7 draft picks. What do you think they need to target? Because like I said, there's a list of positions that this team could go and address. And for me specifically, I think they've got to address defensive end. I think they've got to address cornerback. Those are probably my first two. I would like them to address the offensive line, whether it's an offensive tackle or it's an offensive guard that could position over to playing center. It would be I'd like them to add another defensive tackle if possible. Always adding to that secondary, whether it's a safety or whether it's a nickel corner. I don't have a problem with that. And I think they need a wide receiver. I think when you look at the offensive side of the ball, the offense isn't 100% shored up. I think you need to add a wide receiver at some point, somebody who's going to give you some plays, give you a little bit of action. Whether this guy is drafted in the 3rd round or the 5th round, I think you need to find a way to add a wide receiver to this team. What do you think the Lions have to do with these 7 draft picks that they have?
See, man, it's weird too because I kind of go back and forth. I just, when you see a Sauce Gardner, when you see in the past a Deion Sanders, you see a lockdown cornerback, you would think that this football team has never even seen one on film. But, they tried, it took a swing with Jeff Okudah. It was a disaster. They've tried to piecework it together in Dan Campbell's era, and it just hasn't worked. That's just been a big struggle. But it's not emphasized across the league. Literally everybody. There's only one Sauce Gardner, and there's not that many cornerbacks that are really that good because the league has just made it so much so in favor of the offense. So if they get Kool-Aid McKinstry, I would be okay with that if they got a developmental cornerback. But many people will say, you don't need to do that early in the draft. You can look later on at talented defensive backs. The Lions have not done that. They focused on skill players. And so to me, it really opens it up on both sides of the ball. For me, clearly, and you and most fans would say, hey, you can potentially add to the defensive line somebody to play opposite of Aiden Hutchinson. You could add depth at safety in the 2nd or 3rd round. You could add a lot of pieces that you feel could be impactful on the defensive side. But at the same token, if there's an offensive weapon that you love, you can go that route too, and most people would accept it because Brad Holmes can evaluate and find guys. Like, look, you're hearing about a meeting with a William and Mary defensive lineman. I mean, that's looking deep in the draft for meetings for guys that you've drafted on the offensive line from William and Mary. You're looking there for defensive linemen? Holy cow. And it's just wild the lengths that the Lions are going to go to find the guys that are the right fit. So that's why it's just spread out so vastly. And, I had the blessing to hear Bill Belichick talk with Pat McAfee in one of his most expressive interviews. So you recognize that, hey, getting paid to do interviews makes a lot of coaches happy. And he said, look, you tell me who's available at what spot when I do these predictions, and I can tell you kind of what our thoughts are. So that's how Brad Holmes is going to approach it. They probably have a list of 6 guys that around 20 they're going to start to pay heavy attention to, and then they're going to make their move. And I'm curious to see in the next couple days, does Brad Holmes identify a player that the team loves? Or at 29, you kind of feel like there's a lot of serviceable players at that spot. What's the level of involvement that will be on the team's draft board? Because it's going to be vast. It's going to be different. So, but clearly, I think of the 7 picks, I think 4 of them will be on defense. I think the ratio is going to be 4-3. And the position you may look at is wide receiver, which is deep. You may add, another depth, maybe add 2 offensive linemen and a wide receiver in this draft and keep it moving. So it's going to be very, very, very much so a fascinating look at how this draft shakes out. It's going to be telling. But it's hard to predict because this is the most vast, and Brad Holmes said it. At 29, you got to look at a lot more. So it's going to be very, very fascinating to look at.
Yeah, I agree with you. And look, I think at 29, it's a weird spot. As a Lions fan, I don't remember a time when we were drafting this deep into a draft, which kind of raises a couple of questions. Everybody wants to talk about, they should maybe target this guy at 29. They should maybe go this route at 29. They should maybe do this, do that. In your ideal world, what would the Lions do at 29? What would be the best option for the Lions? Would it be picking somebody at 29? Like you've already brought up a Kool-Aid McKinstry? Or would it possibly be trading back maybe early into the second round and picking up an extra draft pick later on? Or would it be moving up for a guy that you've targeted? Maybe a guy like a Jared Verse, or maybe a Quinyon Mitchell, to a guy who we feel like might be the next Sauce Gardner. What would be ideal in John Macaroon, the Doc's world, for the Lions to do at 29?
Ideal world is move up and get a badass. Move up and get, the guy that you feel is the most impactful, whether it be at wide receiver, at defensive line. I would move up for Quinyon Mitchell, no doubt about it. I think he's impactful. I think he can be a guy that can change the course of a game. You got to hope that, Kool-Aid McKinstry and Terrion Arnold kind of feel like settling. They got skills, but they got more work to do. The other thing is you hope that, a player that many people don't think is going to be there falls. Maybe a Jared Verse, something happens. It's going to be unexpected, but my expectation is that ideally the position, the guy that's there is probably going to be either Darius Robinson or Nealand, an impactful edge that you can say, look, this is the complement to Aiden Hutchinson. Because many will argue that if you unlock Aiden Hutchinson, you can make your secondary better. You can make it so that, hey, if this guy goes from a 10, 11 sack guy to a 20 sack guy, now you're cooking with gasoline. Now you have a guy that can just wreak havoc all over the field. So if you can get that Darius Robinson guy, the guy that can just, boom, be the other threat, you combine that with James Houston and Marcus Davenport, oh my God. And then combined with the defensive line with Aleem McNeil and DJ Reader. Defensive, I think, edge, you just can never. I think the overriding theme is because it just feels like we haven't seen a cornerback do anything in Detroit. We've seen the defensive line do a lot more, and it feels like that position's been better coached than the secondary. To me, if you can get that edge and you can have a two-pronged attack that's just going to wreak havoc for opposing quarterbacks when it's crunch time, and you actually sack Brock Purdy instead of letting him run all over the place and make those plays, then that's what you do, and you hope that a dominant edge guy is there. And at all Lions, we've been looking at Latu as well. A lot of people are looking at him as somebody that has some elite skills that could project to the next level. So to me, I've locked in. While I would love cornerback, my eyes still have yet to believe that there's one that can step in against Justin Jefferson and make the impact. Maybe they do find it. Maybe they find that guy that complements everybody else. But to me, it would indicate that the edge position has a better chance of success faster than a cornerback ever will in the National Football League.
Yeah, look, I wouldn't have a problem if they traded up, they found an edge that they feel is that guy who's going to help transform this defensive line. I think that would be absolutely fantastic. I would co-sign that in a heartbeat. But I think if they have the ability to trade back from 29 into the early second round, I don't want to trade too far back, but I'd like to trade back into the early second round, somewhere within maybe those first 5 picks, because really and truly at that point, it's just like getting a late round first round pick. At 29, what's the difference between 29 and what's the difference between 35? I don't think there's a whole lot of difference, So if you could trade back into that early second round, possibly pick up a 4th round pick and go to work there, you can add more. Like we both agree, first three rounds, you need to get guys who are playing on the field, guys who are making plays and stepping up. When you get to the 4th round, 4th and 5th round guys should be rotational players. 4th and 5th round guys need to be making impacts. So I think if you can add another pick where you can get another impactful player, maybe not a starter, but a guy who's going to give you reps, a guy who will grow into something, doesn't necessarily need to be a Pro Bowler or an All-Pro, but a guy who's going to go out there and cause havoc and be a solid piece of your team, I would love for them to be able to do that. To me, that would be absolutely fantastic if they were able to take that first round pick and turn it into 2 picks. And like I said, if you move back to 35, 36, 37 even, what the hell is the difference between that and 29? If you've got a bucket of guys, because that's what Brad Holmes does. He creates these buckets or these pods, I believe he calls it, and he's got guys in these pods. And if they're available, he goes and gets them out of that pod. He's got guys who basically have a number 1 ranking, guys who have a number 2 ranking, guys who have a number 3 and a number 4 ranking. And as these guys get poached from his pod, basically whoever's left, he's grabbing that next guy that he feels comfortable with. So to me, if you've got 2 or 3 guys in your pod and you're able to move back and then acquire another draft pick that's going to help you out this year, I would do it in a heartbeat. Look, I think, like we've said, Brad Holmes has earned a lot of respect from all of us. And Brad Holmes has the ability to go out there and really master and craft a draft the way he wants to do it. I think this draft is incredibly important for a reasons moving forward. And I think he has the flexibility in this draft to go out there and do a lot of really cool things. It's going to be a lot of fun next Thursday, watching the draft, taking it all in, and seeing what the Lions do with that 29th pick. It'll be interesting to see if they move up early. It'll be interesting to see if they move back maybe a little bit later, or it'll be interesting to see who they take at 29. But either way we go, I think Brad Holmes can find and will add talent to this team to make it better for next year.
Yeah, it's going to be fun, man. The next time we chat, we will be the day of the NFL draft. So next week's podcast will be very detailed, very much in lock with what the latest mocks have been, what people are projecting, what late round sleepers there could be. So it'll be a fun time, man. It's going to be fun because most people have high confidence and are positive about the Lions. Even though some Lions will say, oh, you guys are too negative, I believe that their optimism and the level of hope regarding what the Lions can do is at an all-time high. And it's important. It's impactful. People have expectations for this football team, and this football team can actually deliver. At the highest level, that will be something as the draft progresses and we figure out what positions being targeted and how things shake out. The next thing people are going to pay attention to are the contracts to Goff and St. Brown, and then looking down the road, what happens with Taylor Decker and Frank Ragnow. So there's so much to break down with the Detroit Lions. So it's going to be a great opportunity to focus in on a good football team. And at the same token, the Tigers, even though they can't really score a run, they got to manufacture everything. And it seems like they're slow to start offensively. Putting together some wins, 10-8 at the time of this recording. It's not terrible, but it's kind of in line with expectations for a team that has that low of a payroll. But with the Lions, you realize they're managing the cap the best that they can. There's going to be more challenges along the way. But Brad Holmes has done something to this city and Dan Campbell that hasn't been seen in a long time, which is excite the fan base. New uniforms, freshness, Ford Field being packed, because 20,000 plus on a waiting list for season tickets when the prices have gone up 40% or more in some areas. That's when you realize, okay, winning does cure all. And the belief in Jared Goff and the belief that this football team can take the next step is at an all-time high. So, what do we call this season? This is hype season. And we're about to enter into the biggest 72 hours of hype you're ever going to see. And the fans are going to love every pick. It's going to be all optimism until we get to the schedule. And then we'll start breaking down how the games could actually shake out against the good opponents. So it's a fun time, and we'll be here at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network breaking it all down. For the Jock, Adam Strozinski, I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Make sure you follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. Hit us up. Let us know what you think. If we're on the right side of history, if we're on the wrong side, if you feel like something on the uniform would really upset you if you saw it, let us know. We've been talking about the uniform and the Lions in the draft for the better part of the last month. So everywhere and anywhere that you listen to your favorite audio content, hit us up, Detroit Sports Podcast. Like and subscribe, and our content will find you. I can't wait. 1 week away. Get to fired up with my guy for the next edition of Doc and Jock.